Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I sat on one of those semi-comfortable padded benches typical of San Diego International Airport, staring out the large window at Gate 14, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I was killing time before my flight, grasping at any distraction my bored mind could conjure. I fiddled with the tangled wires of my Walkman, tried to make sense of the awkward asymmetrical Southwest-style patterns woven into the carpet, but mostly, I people-watched, doing my best not to be obvious about it. Airports have always made me feel a little sad. They still do, really. There's something about leaving, even temporarily, that makes me wish I could pack everything and everyone into my backpack. 5 years earlier, I had come to California trying to escape Baltimore's smog-choked skies, overcrowded streets, and the kind of noise that clung to you even days after leaving. But Baltimore wasn't all bad. I had family there, good friends, familiar hangouts, and memories I could share without having to explain myself. I figured if I left for a while, I could always go back and it would all still be there. But when I visited the summer after freshman year, everything had shifted. My friends had moved on with new people and new places. My family carried on without me, and the memories we once shared were replaced with new ones I wasn't part of. That's when I realized home wasn't home anymore. Baltimore had become just another place I used to live. I tried to build something new in California to make it feel like home, but that feeling never quite came back. I was in my second senior year at the University of Southern California, studying English literature. I don't know why I chose reading as my major. I didn't even really like to read all that much. But I needed to choose something, and it seemed like a cool thing to be able to talk about at parties. After 4 semesters and 4 summer sessions, I still couldn't quote Shakespeare or truly appreciate Moby Dick. I was just going through the motions, trying to graduate before my younger sister could catch up to me. My parents weren't happy with my reluctance to finish school on time, but I didn't really care as long as I could finesse them into paying for next month's rent. I casually glanced around the terminal and sized up my wingmen. There were the usual suspects, a young mother and her baby who had undoubtedly never flown before, a few frat boys, random businessmen, but the one that caught my eye was a particularly attractive young woman. She looked no older than 20 or 21, maybe, and sported a brown paperboy cap over her reddish-brown, shoulder-length hair. I could tell by the windbreaker she wore that she also went to USC. She was leaning against the wall next to the window watching the sunset. I couldn't see her face as she was facing away from me, but I could tell she was different from the rest of them. While the other passengers concentrated on their watches and flight times, she just stared out the window. Something about her posture seemed sad to me. It was like she was saying goodbye to San Diego, and as odd as that seemed to me at the time, I couldn't help but understand what she was going through. I had done the same thing when I left Baltimore for the first time. I didn't see the cityscape or the marshes in the distance. There was only the sense that I would never see that place again, at least not like that. The sun continued its fiery descent beyond the mountains in the distance and left blazing patterns on the other passengers' faces. To me, everything looks prettier during a sunset. The terminal occupants seemed to be more alive and more reverent as the sun gave its final burst of reddish-purple light before darkness overtook them. But darkness never does overtake anyone, literally. The lights overhead would keep us protected long enough for the sun to bathe us in the aftershocks of its birth once again. The sun finally died, and the boarding process began. I was in seat 7A, which is the second window seat on the right after first class, so I would be one of the last people to get on the plane. That was fine by me. The less time I had to actually spend on the plane, the better. But I'm always amazed how people will get up to stand in line before their row is even called. What point is there in pushing and shoving to get on a flying cattle car? I stayed seated on my bench and waited until it was only me and the girl by the window who hadn't joined the herd. Eventually, she hiked off towards the line. Feeling like I had made a point to all the other impatient travelers, I collected my things, which consisted of one backpack filled with a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and fresh batteries for my Walkman, which I always had activated despite warnings from the crew, and boarded Flight 422, bound for Denver. I made my way through first class and bumped into a particularly jittery businessman. Accidentally, of course. As I arrived at row 7, I noticed my window seat had been occupied. At first, I was frustrated with the occupants' obvious stupidity for not being able to read their ticket, but on further inspection, I noticed the seat was held by the girl from the window. She noticed me immediately and began apologizing before I had a chance to inform her of her oversight. "I'm so sorry, really. I just wanted to watch the baggage carts roam around. Here, I'll get out and let you in," she said, or maybe something like that. She was speaking so quickly that I had to fill in the blanks. No, it's cool. I like the aisle more anyway. I like the legroom." I lied as I put my backpack into the overhead compartment and fit myself the best I could into the cramped seat. She thanked me and went back to looking out the window. The flight attendants began their robotic spiel that I had seen 100 times before on similar flights, but as they were explaining the fascinating intricacies of the seatbelt, my attention kept diverting to the beauty sitting next to me. I masked my interest by pretending to look out the window and turned up the volume on my Walkman. She seemed a bit happier now that we were actually on the plane and almost to the point of no return. Just before takeoff, one of the flight attendants helpfully informed me that all electronic devices must be turned off and stowed for takeoff and landing. I tried to bluff her by saying that it was off and I was just wearing the earphones for comfort, but she didn't believe me and was happy to remind me a second time. I took them off and quickly realized that I had the volume up way too high for any sort of fast talk. I chastised myself under my breath and heard a giggle from my left. Window girl had her hand over her mouth, trying to hide her amusement. I finally got a good look at her face. She looked so young and beautiful, yet she had a weariness about her that could only have come from age and experience. Her large, almond-shaped hazel eyes were expressive and vibrant. To this day, I have never seen that spark of divinity in anyone else. Of course, my thoughts were not as articulate at the time. I could only reply with a muffled chuckle of my own. Before I continue, I should mention that I detest flying in general. I hate flying, but I loathe takeoffs and landings most of all. Something about being rocketed across the ground at 150 miles per hour with nothing but a few flimsy tires to stop us is more than a little disconcerting for me. But as I gripped the armrest in preparation for the most harrowing experience my stomach goes through, I noticed that she had done the exact same thing. It was too late, and my hand covered hers. I pulled away and turned to her apologetically, but she didn't seem to be upset. She just giggled at me again, and I couldn't help but laugh at my awkwardness. I could tell then that there was something special about this girl. She made me feel less cynical, like I didn't have to be so angry, like I could just laugh about things and let them go. She also made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I forgave her for that. Before I knew it, we were completely airborne. At the very least, she had distracted me long enough to get through the first rough spot. "That's the worst part," she said. "Well, the second worst. I hate the landings the most. It feels like the landing gear could snap off at any moment," she continued. I was stunned. More so at the fact that she was talking to me than by her words. Not that girls don't typically like talking to me. I'm not an ugly guy and I can be quite charming when I want to be. But she just kept talking like she assumed I was on the same wavelength. She went on about how she hated flying but didn't have the time to drive the 8 hours back home. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I couldn't catch all that she was saying because of her habit of talking quickly, but I liked listening to her. She had a kind of sing-song voice that made whatever she spoke of seem about 10 times more interesting than normal. I followed along as closely as I could, catching a full phrase here and there and replying with some sort of anecdote. Gradually, I managed to coax out some facts about her. She was indeed 20, from Denver, and was about to finish her freshman year at USC. She was going home because she missed her mom, who lived by herself in a 2-bedroom off Colfax Avenue. "What about you?" she asked. "Why are you going to Denver?" "I'm not really," I said. "I have an hour layover, and then I'm heading to Boston for a wedding." "Oh, really?" she squealed. "I love weddings. Is it yours?" "No way," I bellowed. "It's my cousin's wedding." Again. "I'm not too keen on going, but my mom says I need to be supportive." I told her that I was supportive the last 2 times, and those hadn't worked out. "Maybe I'm jinxed." She giggled and told me the story of her Aunt Linda, who had been married 5 times, and each time the guy was younger and the marriage was shorter. I was the flower girl every time. Let me tell you, I can throw flowers like it's nobody's business. We both laughed. Hey, what were you listening to? Oh, just some Counting Crows. I love Counting Crows. She bounced in her seat. Can I have a listen? I handed her the earphones and turned on the Walkman. As she listened, she closed her eyes and mouthed the words. I watched her, bewitched by the movement of her lips and her sway, like some kind of beautiful red-haired serpent. The song ended and she handed me the earphones. I love that song, she added. So, you look a little too old to be a student. What do you do in San Diego? Hey, I'm only 24. I did my best to feign injury, but I had heard this too many times from my parents, and it didn't bother me anymore. I'm a super senior, which is a lame name for people who couldn't get their act together quickly enough and have to spend an extra year in school. I regretted my candor almost as soon as I finished speaking, but she didn't seem to notice. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm undeclared still. I'm thinking of going into medicine, but I don't think I have that kind of time. Her face wore a far-off expression, more like the one I had witnessed back in the terminal. Suddenly, the spark returned. Plus, I don't think I have the brains for something like that. I think I'd like something in social work. Or maybe teaching. I don't know. What do you study? English. Cool. What are you going to do with that? I didn't like thinking about life after college. I knew it had to happen at some point, but the thought of having to pick up and move again was a constant thorn in my side. Which was stupid because I didn't even really like San Diego either. Right, I guess. Or teach. Maybe. That's okay. Like you said, you're only 24. You have plenty of time to figure something out. She smiled at me, but I couldn't get the sense of dread out of my brain. She must have sensed my unease and changed the subject. We talked about all manner of things, music, movies, the weather. My funk never had a chance against her never-ending stream of stories and questions. Before I knew it, we were landing. We braced for impact. As soon as the plane finished slowing, she stuck out her tongue and rolled her eyes. I had never seen a girl do that before, and it made me laugh out loud. She just elbowed me in response. The plane reached the terminal, and the flight attendants read their goodbyes over the PA system. As we were deplaning, I realized that I had never gotten her name. Maybe if I was lucky, I could get her number and call her when I got back to San Diego. By the way, I'm Ethan, I said in my best attempt at acting casual. Oh yeah, my name is Mira, but everyone just calls me Mia, she offered, extending a delicate hand for a shake. I took it, my hand wrapped almost completely around hers, and I had to be careful not to squeeze too hard. As I met her gaze, I forgot about asking for her phone number. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sadness swelling up. It had just dawned on me that after we left that plane, we would probably never see each other again. Phone number or not, I wouldn't be in San Diego for much longer anyway. So what was the point? Somehow, I managed to meekly say it was nice meeting you, and reached for my backpack in the overhead bin. You too, she said. Her voice was sullen, and she reverted to that faraway look again. I didn't want to leave it like that, but I didn't have the strength to get any more attached just to lose her. I shuffled out of the plane with the rest of the herd, and as I reached the jetway, I increased my speed in an attempt to distance myself from her. I stepped into the terminal and was struck by the cacophony of noise coming from the slot machines, the announcements from the various gates, and the people boarding and deboarding. Suddenly, I heard her call out my name from behind. Wait, Ethan. I stopped and turned around. She was jogging toward me, and she had the spark with her again. She was out of breath by the time she reached me, but she was too excited not to speak. I just got a great idea. Instead of going to Boston, why don't you stay with me this weekend? You said you didn't really want to go to the wedding anyway, right? So forget them. Hang out with me. We'll have fun. I promise. I was having trouble understanding her, but I got the basic idea. First, I thought she was crazy. I couldn't just not go. But she was right, I was not looking forward to it. I didn't want to sit through another meaningless ceremony. I didn't want to look my father in the face and tell him I had no idea what I was going to do after school. Mia could tell that I was struggling with her proposal, but she didn't back down. Please, she said. Please come with me. The spark in her eyes bore into me, and I melted. Okay, I said, almost in a whisper. Her mother was waiting for us as we sauntered out into the parking lot. She appeared to be in her late 40s, but I could tell that she had been through quite a bit. She was haggard, like someone who had pulled too many double shifts and had little to show for it. My dad had that look. Mia embraced her mother tightly. It was a beautiful type of hug, the kind that only two people who truly belong together could give. I admit that I felt a little left out, but I enjoyed watching them. So, who is this with you? She asked as they pulled away. This is Ethan. I met him on the plane. He's going to be a writer someday. I was a little taken aback but flattered that she was trying to make me look good in front of her mother. Oh, how nice, she said. I'll have to keep my eye on you in the future. Then, won't I? Yes, ma'am, I replied as enthusiastically as I knew how. Well, why don't you put your things in the car and we'll get going? I nodded, grabbed my backpack and Mia's suitcase, and lifted them into the trunk. I went to open the passenger door for Mia when I noticed she was nowhere around me. She had walked back toward the airport, stopping short of actually going back in. Even though her back was turned to me, I could tell she had the faraway look again, just like she had back in San Diego. I was beginning to wonder what she was doing, but her mother didn't seem to think there was anything odd about it. So I stood at the car door, waiting for her. After about a minute, she returned to the car. She flashed me a cute smile as she stepped into the front seat. All finished, Mia? Her mother asked. Yep, I'm all set. We reached her mother's house in short order. To my surprise, it was exactly as Mia had described it. A two-bedroom house off Colfax Avenue. It was almost indistinguishable from the other houses around it, save for a large cast-iron welcome sign hanging above the front entrance. It was obviously built as part of some housing development, as they were all painted the same beige color with a white garage door. Though they were cookie-cutter and cheap, they were definitely livable and clean. I lived in a similar development back in San Diego. The inside was a monument to the empty nest. It was clean and tidy everywhere, except for the various home improvement projects in different degrees of completion. The living room was in the process of being repainted but had obviously been restarted several times, because there were 3 different colors going. The hallway bathroom was almost finished being retiled. I'm so sorry about the mess, Ethan, said Mia's mother. I wasn't expecting my daughter to be bringing home boys. She was bustling around the various rooms, trying to make her little monument seem less so. Believe me, I'm not typically brought home, so this is a rarity for me too. By the way, do you have a name, or should I just call you Mom? My name is Sandra, but you can call me Mom if you like. Yeah, Mom is everybody's mom around here, interjected Mia. Mom it is, then, I said as I placed the bags on the couch. Mia expressed a desire for food and sleep, and I had to agree with her. That's another thing about air travel. Even though you are sitting the whole time, you feel worn out after. Mia and I gobbled down a turkey sandwich each. Sandra laid down a makeshift bed for me in Mia's room. This surprised me because, even though I was 24, my parents would never let me share a room with a girl, especially a girl as pretty as Mia. She had shed her windbreaker shorts combo and was dressed in a long t-shirt, socks, and little else. She crawled into bed and buried her face in her pillow. She was asleep moments later. Taking that as my cue, I stripped to my boxers and made myself comfortable before laying down for a well-deserved rest. Sunday, May 15th, 3:48 a.m. I awoke in the middle of the night with the sudden urge to pee and stumbled my way into the hall bathroom. On my way back to Mia's room, I noticed that the light in the kitchen was on. As I got closer, I heard what sounded like crying. I entered the kitchen to see Sandra sitting alone at the table, sobbing quietly, a cup of tea in front of her. Mom? I called out quietly. She jerked up and quickly rubbed the tears from her eyes, smearing her mascara. Oh, just having a cup of tea. Would you like some? She asked, her voice hoarse. Yeah, sure. I could use some tea, I lied. I didn't really like tea, but I wasn't used to seeing grown women cry, and I didn't want to leave her alone. I sat down as she poured me a mug. So I started, unsure how to word it. Are you okay? She let out a small, bitter laugh. Oh well, no. Not really, she admitted. It's just hard seeing her like this. What do you mean? I asked, suddenly uneasy. She hesitated, as if debating whether or not to continue. You know, having to quit school because nobody would leave her alone. I furrowed my brow. Leave her alone about what? She stared at me in disbelief. Mia hadn't told me anything. Oh no. Oh, you poor thing, she whispered. I screwed up big time. I shouldn't have said anything. She started to stand, but I reached out instinctively and stopped her. Wait a minute, I said. What's going on? She exhaled deeply and slowly sat back down, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them together. Mia has epilepsy. Or at least, she had epilepsy, she said softly. My stomach dropped. 3 years ago, she had a treatment that was supposed to cure her. It was experimental and she knew the risks, but she wanted to do it anyway. She was tired of people treating her like she was delicate, like she was a freak. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The doctors went into her brain, found the part that was causing the seizures, and fixed it. Everything was fine for a while. But then, she started getting these massive headaches. Sandra's voice cracked. Turns out the doctors screwed up. They damaged a blood vessel. Could burst at any moment. Could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years from now, or she could be dead in her room right now, for all we know. Her eyes glistened with fresh tears, and she let out a shuddering breath. It just isn't fair. All she's ever wanted is to feel normal. And those doctors assured me it was safe. She wiped her face with her hands and let out a choked sob. Please, Ethan, don't tell her I told you. I could do nothing but nod. I looked down at my untouched tea. I had spent my whole life running away from places, from people, from responsibilities. But this time I couldn't run. I didn't want to run. I was going to have to leave someone behind. But this time it wasn't me who was leaving. It was her. And where she was going, I couldn't follow. No matter what I did, it wouldn't make a difference. I took a sip of my tea, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Sandra came over to me and embraced me, like she had embraced her daughter earlier. Her touch made me ask the question I had been dreading. How do you deal with it? I whispered. She pulled back slightly and smoothed down my hair like a mother would. The only way I can, sweetie, she murmured. I help her live, with what time she has left. She let out a shaky breath. That's all we can do, right? I didn't answer. I just took another sip of my tea. Sunday, May 15th. 9:30 a.m., Holy Jesus. Mia and I both woke from a dead sleep when she rolled off her bed and fell right on top of me. She let out a groan as I lay beneath her, stunned. For a moment, we were both silent. Then I burst out laughing. She just groaned again and put her hand on her head, shaking it. Apparently, she had a habit of tossing and turning in bed. And I had just found out the hard way. That's gonna be a bruise, she muttered. I grinned. Could have been worse. She narrowed her eyes at me playfully before climbing off. However, the morning's antics made me forget long enough to enjoy breakfast. Sandra made us waffles and bacon while we talked and joked about all manner of things. They prodded me about my family in Baltimore, about my life in San Diego. Normally, I was quiet when the conversation steered toward me. But with these women, I knew they were merely curious, not judgmental. Even so, in the back of my mind, I knew that talking about myself was infinitely easier than asking about Mia. Now, I understood why she got that far-away look sometimes. The fact that she had little time to work with weighed heavily upon her. And now it weighed on me, too. I did my best to put on a good face for her, because I knew for her I had to. Sunday, May 15th, 11:12 a.m. Mia promised me a day of fun on the Strip. I had only ever been to Las Vegas once before, for a friend's 21st birthday, so I hadn't experienced much of what the city had to offer. We saddled up into Sandra's car and headed toward the casinos, the bright lights, and the never-ending noise. She was driving way too fast. I held on to the oh shit handle, as she called it, for dear life. Jesus, Mia, I gasped as she whipped between lanes. She just smirked. Oh, relax, I know what I'm doing. I tried to believe her. I really did. Thankfully, traffic started to back up near Caesar's Palace, forcing her to slow down. Finally, I muttered. She just rolled her eyes. We spent the morning trouncing around the Forum Shops, one of the nicest malls I had ever seen. The ceilings were painted to resemble the sky, complete with artificial sunrises and sunsets every 15 minutes. I was amazed. She just grinned knowingly. Cool. Huh? I nodded, unable to deny it. As we walked through the maze of shops, she linked her arm through mine, dragging me from store to store. If window shopping cost anything, we must have spent a fortune. But we barely bought a thing. Mostly, I just admired her. The way she found beauty in things no one else would look twice at. The way she breathed in life, like she was afraid it might slip away. And the way she laughed, like she had forever, like she wasn't running out of time. And for the first time in my life, I wished I could stop time. For her. For me. For this moment. Because I knew it wouldn't last forever. Sunday, May 15th, 2:22 p.m. So, are you having fun? Isn't this so much better than some stupid wedding? Mia asked as we walked down the strip, her hand still looped through my arm. Despite myself, I was having a lot of fun. I constantly worried about her. But I remembered my promise to Sandra and tried not to let on that I knew. Well, let's think about that for a second. I teased. I'm spending my weekend in the entertainment capital of the world with a hot brunette. I'd say I'm doing pretty good. She laughed, squeezing my arm tighter. But what about your parents? Are they going to be mad at me? She pouted up at me with wide, exaggerated puppy dog eyes. I sighed dramatically. They'll get over it, I said. So, what else do you have planned for me? She grinned mischievously. I want to show you my special spot. I stopped walking and stared at her, my mouth slightly open. She knew exactly what she was doing. Your special spot? I repeated. She laughed, giving me a playful shove. Get your mind out of the gutter, she scolded. I smirked. Hey, I didn't say anything. She rolled her eyes and kept walking. Well, are you coming? She called back. I jogged after her. She led me through the entrance of Mandalay Bay Casino, past the bright lights and ringing slot machines, until we reached the signs for the Shark Reef Aquarium. The Shark Reef? I asked, raising a brow. Trust me, she said. It's magic. Sunday, May 15th, 2:47 p.m. She was right. The place was magic. We walked through the tunnels of glass, completely surrounded by a giant aquarium, where sharks, stingrays, and sea turtles glided effortlessly through the water. The blue light refracted off the walls, casting wavy, shimmering patterns across Mia's face. She led me toward a bench near a smaller tank, where children excitedly reached in to touch the fish. I used to come here every day after school, she murmured. I turned to her. Really? She nodded. I've known every single fish in this tank since the exhibit opened. They all have names. I watched as she gazed into the water, her eyes brimming with nostalgia. I wondered if this was another one of her goodbyes. Which one is your favorite? I asked. She smiled softly and pointed toward a large, slow-moving sea turtle near the bottom. That one. His name is Otis, she said. He's the only one who seems to know he's in a tank. He's always looking for ways to get out. I watched the turtle for a moment. I heard that they tried to release him once. She continued, her voice quieter. But he followed the boat back to shore. He wouldn't go out to sea. It's like he didn't want to leave all his friends behind. I swallowed hard. That's kind of heartbreaking. She nodded, sighing. I guess I feel sorry for him a little bit. It must be sad. To be afraid of the future. Her faraway look returned. I knew what she meant. She wasn't talking about Otis anymore. I hesitated, then said, watch this. I gestured for her to get closer to the glass. She scooted forward. Put your hand against the tank, I instructed. She did. Almost instantly, Otis noticed and swam toward her. I grinned. He likes you. She watched as the turtle followed her hand along the glass. A real, genuine smile bloomed across her face. Maybe he just knows a good thing when he sees it, I murmured. She turned to me, eyes glimmering. I didn't look away. She rested her head on my shoulder, wrapping her arms around mine. We sat like that, in silence, for a long time. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to bottle this moment and keep it forever, because deep down I knew we didn't have forever. Sunday, May 15th, 9:32 p.m. We were walking down the strip again, arguing over what to do for dinner, when Mia suddenly gasped. "Oh, let's go on the big shot," she cried, pointing toward the Stratosphere Towers roller coaster. I groaned. "No way. I was just on a plane last night, and I'm going to be on one tomorrow. Can't I have one day without an upset stomach?" She pouted. "But I've never been on it before, and I don't want to miss an opportunity." I sighed heavily. She pleaded. Her eyes sparkled. Her lip jutted out in a pout. I was doomed. "Fine," I relented. "But let's not sit up front." "Deal," she squealed, grabbing my hand and dragging me toward the line. Sunday, May 15th, 9:58 p.m. I should have known better. I should have known she would convince me to sit up front. And I should have known she would call me a chicken if I refused. I groaned as we slowly made our way to the top of the ramp. I gripped the safety harness for dear life. But just as we reached the peak, I felt something soft slip into my hand. I looked down. Mia was holding my hand. "Do it like this," she murmured, leaning forward and closing her eyes. I hesitated. Then, reluctantly, I shut my eyes too. The ride dropped. I expected to scream. But instead, I just felt weightless. The wind whipped against my face, and I gripped her hand tighter as we soared through the night. Felt like we were flying. Felt like we were free. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. Sunday, May 15th, 10:35 p.m. That night, we made love. I won't bore you with the details, but I will say, I finally understood what poets meant when they wrote about love. It was the happiest I had ever been, but also the saddest, because as I held her in my arms, I knew we didn't have much time left. Monday, May 16th, 9 a.m. I woke to the sound of the radio playing softly from Mia's alarm clock. She didn't stir. I reached over her to hit snooze. Then, suddenly, a terrible feeling washed over me. I froze. She was facing away from me, her body still. I touched her shoulder. No reaction. No warmth. My heart stopped. I turned her over. Her face was frozen in a half-smile. A small trickle of blood had dried beneath her nose. I shook her. I screamed her name. But I already knew. She was gone. Monday, May 16th, 9:03 a.m. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I just held her, willing her to wake up. But she wouldn't. She couldn't. I don't know how long I sat there. My arms wrapped around her lifeless body. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist anymore. All that was real was the overwhelming pain. The kind that makes you forget how to think, how to function, how to even exist. At some point, my shaking hands brushed against something clenched in her fingers. A piece of folded notebook paper. My name was written across the front in her familiar, loopy handwriting. I swallowed hard and unfolded it. My vision blurred with fresh tears as I read, "Dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then my fears have been realized. I didn't make it through the night. Right now, you're asleep beside me. I want to wake you up, but I'm too afraid. I don't want to go in front of you. My head hurts so much right now that I can't see straight. I hope you don't think this is your fault. I've been having headaches like this for the past couple of months. Tonight, I just have a bad feeling, like I've done all the living I can do. I wish I could stay with you. I want to be with you always. But it hurts so much. I need you to do something for me, Ethan. Now that I'm gone, I want you to live. For the both of us. Maybe someday we'll see each other again. But until then, I need you to live for me. Ever since I saw you in the airport, I knew there was something special about you. I knew you could help me feel like I really lived. And you did. You gave me the best days of my life. Whatever you do, don't give up on life. If I had made that mistake, I never would have met you. I'm feeling dizzy. I want to crawl back into bed with you. I'm so afraid, Ethan. I hope you can find the strength to keep looking, no matter how hard it is, or how long it takes. Keep looking for life. If you do that, I promise you we'll be together again someday. Love always, Mia. P.S. Remember, keep looking. I'll be searching too. Monday, May 16th, 9:15 a.m. I screamed. I sobbed. I clutched the letter so tightly that the paper nearly ripped apart in my hands. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. She was just here. laughing, kissing me, loving me, and now she was gone. I buried my face in her neck, inhaling her fading warmth. I wanted to stay like that forever. I wanted to never let go. But deep down, I knew I had to. Monday, May 16th, 9:45 a.m. I don't remember calling for help. I don't remember Sandra's shriek of agony when she found us. I don't remember the paramedics arriving, or the way they gently pried me away from her. All I remember is the emptiness. The hollow, unbearable emptiness. I had lost people before. I had lost places before. But this was something else entirely. I wasn't just losing Mia. I was losing home. Because for the first time in my life, I had found a place where I belonged. And now that place was gone. Tuesday, May 17th, 3:30 p.m. I sat at the airport terminal, staring blankly at the floor. I had a ticket in my hand. A one-way flight back to San Diego. But I didn't feel like I was going home. Because home wasn't a place anymore. Home was a person. And she wasn't here. I felt the weight of the letter in my pocket. Her last words. Her final wish. I reached inside and traced my fingers over the folds. Keep looking, she had written. She wanted me to live. She wanted me to find something worth living for. I clenched my jaw and stood up. Not because I was ready. Not because I knew how. But because she had asked me to. I picked up my bag. I walked toward my gate. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. But I kept looking. Because somewhere, somehow, she was looking too. Mia's final words were simple. Keep looking. But what does that really mean? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, like, share and subscribe.